Hello, and welcome to episode 9 of Dare to Speak, Difficult Conversations That Can Change Everything. In this episode, I'm going to talk about what happens when there's rupture in relationships and what we can do to repair. The reason why I'm covering this topic early on in this series, actually, is because in Dare to Speak, and I spoke in the last episode about silence and the way that silence is communication, and I encourage you to take a look at the gaps of silence that maybe are in your life or in the lives of somebody you care about around you where they're not speaking, and that we should treat communication, even when that communication is silence, as being something that's giving us data and telling us something about the world and what matters. In this episode, I'm talking about rupture in relationships. Rupture, when something ruptures in an earthquake, the earth ruptures, it pulls apart. A wound appears within the earth. In a relationship, rupture is when something goes wrong. Perhaps there's a misunderstanding, there's a communication that got missed, there is an irritation or an explosion of emotion or rage, or something happened. Silence itself actually is often a rupture or a sign of a rupture. It's a sign when something has gone wrong. And I don't know if you're familiar with, but there's that phrase, never go to sleep on an argument. And one of the reasons why people are told never to go to sleep on an argument is because it feels uncomfortable to go to sleep or to separate or leave a conversation while there are still problems in that conversation. And so what that means is there can be this drive to repair what went wrong. Of course, there's many different types of repair. And sometimes a repair is a glossing over. I think that must come from decorating, from somebody not properly repairing a crack in the wall and then they just gloss over it. They put gloss paint over it and it all looks nice and shiny, and then we can pretend like it didn't happen. Of course, that's not repairing it, that's glossing it over. There's another phrase, isn't there? Sweeping it under the carpet. So instead of clearing it up and doing something about it, we'll just pretend it's not there. Now, it is really normal for human beings to have ruptures in their relationships. It's going to happen. We're going to say the wrong thing. We're going to misunderstand. We're going to get emotional when the other person says something. And we're going to lose our cool. And we're going to get annoyed. And it might turn into an argument. You said you were going to come back at 6. Well, I know, but I didn't realise it was going to take longer than I thought, so I came back at 8. It's not a big deal. Well, it is a big deal for me because I cooked dinner and now you're not there and I blah, blah, blah. And so what happens is the rupture turns into an argument, and over time, those arguments turn into repeated arguments. If we take the view that we must repair, but we don't really understand what repair is, then what happens is we can think that we can repair it by being right, getting our point across and getting the other person to back down, surrender, be persuaded by what we have to say. Or we can gloss it over, or we can force the other person into just having a hug. This happens very often. I see this with youngsters. Well, I know you're still upset with me, but let's hug and somehow that will make it better. And it's true, a hug at the right time makes everything so much better, so much sweeter. It's a beautiful thing to do. But a hug when somebody's still tense, or when they're still upset, or when they've still got resentful, or when they've still got something to say, can be incredibly difficult and damaging. And children have often, a lot of my clients will say in their childhood, they were forced to hug a parent while they were still angry with them or upset about what happened. And therein lies silence and pretense. Because we've got to be ready for that repair. And sometimes it does mean going to sleep. Because guess what? There's another saying that says, it's a good idea. It'll look different in the morning. Actually do go to sleep, give yourself some time to calm down, reflect, relax. And the next day we go, oh, you know what, actually, I think I overreacted. I really am sorry. I know you went to a great effort to cook a meal for me. I absolutely got carried away. I should have just sent you a text and told you I was going to be a couple of hours late. I do apologise. Because then you could have done something else, called a friend or done anything. And actually, I wasn't thinking about that. That would be a repair. That would be a beautiful, clarify, communicate and correct. Really nicely done. What you'll notice over the course of these podcasts is that sometimes the way that we correct is by admitting the other person has a point. Something happens within rupture where we don't want to admit the other person is right about anything. And that's partly because we think that if we admit they're right about anything, then it means that they might feel that they're right about everything. And that feels a bit too much like losing ground. So when we're daring to speak, sometimes one of the things we're going to dare to do is say, you know what, I'm sorry. Or you're right. You are right to raise the fact that I do consistently put my car keys in a different place every single time I come in and then get all upset because I can't find them. Instead of getting defensive and argumentative because you're daring to raise that thing that I feel bothered about, I'm actually going to admit that you're right. You're doing it for the right reasons. An admission. Because one of the things that people often think about repairing following a rupture is that we must find a way to assert and hold our own position and be right. But actually, sometimes the way we create repair is by admitting that, in fact, we were wrong. Admitting that we were wrong. I'm going to go back. I know I was talking about it in some previous episodes about when my marriage broke down, but I really did learn so much from that. And one of the things that I learned is that in my anger and my distress and my shame and my embarrassment, when my ex-husband asked me for a divorce, underneath all of that really was the admission that he was right. He wasn't wrong. He was right. He was right about something I didn't want to hear or I didn't want to listen to. The person who is saying to you, look, I'm getting really bothered by the stress in the morning of finding the keys, and I really feel it could be resolved by putting them in that bowl that we've put by the door for the keys to be put into. Well, they're right about that. Not only are they right about it, but they're right to raise it. So in this episode where we're talking about how rupture happens, how the earth gets ripped apart in the earthquake of an argument, we're also talking about humility and acceptance, that sometimes the person who is saying that thing is right. Now, getting to something a little bit more difficult, which is in a toxic or a difficult relationship, which we're going to talk about. I'm going to talk about those partly in their very own episodes, but I'm actually going to talk about them in everyday episodes, every week episodes. And the reason why I'm going to do that is because, and what I've seen in my experience, my personal experience, but also in my professional experience working as a coach, through all the training that I've had and as a psychotherapist, toxic behavior is a bit different from toxic people. A person who is toxic is a person whose behavior is problematic to be around. Sometimes it's a little bit problematic. Sometimes it's extremely problematic to the point that it's actually dangerous. Okay? So it's a bit like smoke from a bonfire. It is definitely problematic if you've lit a fire and the smoke is getting in your eyes and getting in your nose, and I don't like that. And it is toxic. But, the smoke will settle down as the damp gets burnt off and then it will be okay. But if you're sitting in the room with a raging fire and you're just breathing in piles of ash, then that's very toxic and you definitely don't want to be in that environment. So when we're looking at toxic people, when we're labeling people as toxic, I think it's more useful to label behavior as toxic. And the reason for doing that is because all of us, every single one of us, is capable of toxic behavior. All of us. And I think it's really important to accept that. All of us can be unreasonable. All of us can be closed-minded. All of us can try and cover up when we don't know something, so we just adopt a more extreme position. All of us can be volatile. All of us can kitchen sink. All of us can become emotional and shame, blame, and criticize the other person rather than admitting we were wrong. We're all capable of doing that. All of us make repeated mistakes. All of us know better, but we don't always act better. All of us have the capacity to let fear take charge. All of us we have the capacity to try and persuade and force somebody else to do something rather than accept that they just don't want to do it. Sometimes this dynamic within a relationship becomes continuous. And in difficult relationships, there are people who will manufacture rupture so that they can get the other person to do something or the other person to accept guilt and blame. There are definitely people who behave in these ways, and I will talk about them. And if that's something that's affecting you in your life, please communicate with me and I will do what I can to help, but I will also do a podcast particularly to cover that particular circumstance. But in the beginning sessions, in the beginning podcasts, I'm going to be talking more generally and more widely. But I do want you to know that I have an awareness of those far more extreme, more complicated situations. But at the moment, we're talking about toxicity because it is important to recognize that we're all capable of it, because when we do that, we can start looking at our part in a relationship issue and start seeing it as a dynamic. Two people. One person who might be drawing away, one person who might be stepping forwards, one person who might really want to get away from the argument so that they can calm down and regulate themselves and then come back to it later. The other person who's really worried that if we don't resolve it now, we'll go to bed on an argument and you won't come back to it later, because they've seen that you have all the best intentions, which is to go away, calm down and come back to it later. But somehow you never get back into that conversation because it's a difficult one. So what happens is one person is trying to push and pursue repairing, and the other person just needs a little bit more time and space. And these are the ways in which conflict continues far beyond the initial problem, which is I'm just upset because you said you would be home at 7 and you weren't home, and actually turns into these monumental, awful, all night and all the next day arguments that we just want to try and avoid. And a part of the reason why we end up staying silent. So I don't know whether there is anything in what I've said here that will resonate with you and will connect with you. I'm talking really openly about the mess of rupture and repair. It's a messy space. It's a space where we can all be the victim and we can all be the perpetrator. We can all be the goodie and the baddie. We can draw our lines. We can say, I'm tired. Yeah, well, I'm tired too. Well, I'm more tired than you. Well, I'm only tired because of this. And then we can elevate and we can escalate the rupture. But the rupture is just caused actually by the fact that I'm tired. And guess what? You're tired too. We've got two tired people. Oh my gosh, we need to sit down and have a conversation about what we do to make things a bit easier when we're both tired, when we're both struggling. That would be connection. But that would mean daring to speak and saying, let me do my clarify. I want to clarify that I'm finding it a bit difficult because I'm not getting enough sleep or not getting enough rest. I'm working really hard at work and I need to be able to come home and just decompress from 20 minutes rather than get straight into the cooking and the cleaning and whatever needs to happen next. I'd love to hear about what it's like for you. and the other person says, I'm exhausted. I've been at home all day. I've been dealing with all of these things. Perhaps you run your own business. Perhaps you've got kids there. And I'm really, really tired. And I just want to be able to get away from it all and decompress myself. And I was kind of imagining you were going to walk through the door and take over everything so that I could just stop. But now you want to stop too. So now we're fighting, we're arm wrestling over who stops first, or most, or needs it most, or deserves it most. Instead of saying, golly, how are we going to solve this? Maybe what we're going to do is come up with a solution that works for both of us. And guess what? That looks like connection. But in that, we have to be able to dare to speak. And that would be daring to speak, to say, I notice I'm tired, but I also notice you're tired too. So we're having, where we should be coming home, you should be coming back from work and I should be greeting you and we should be connecting and feeling really good about the fact we're not alone. We're setting the frame for us to carry on being alone. And I don't think either of us really want that. So let's work together to do something about it. And of course, we need the correct part of clarify, communicate and correct, because the first time you try and say that, it's probably not going to work. Maybe even the second or the third time. But it will work if you can work on that emotional regulation and on that clarity. Or if you recognise, and over the course of listening to these podcasts and working for me, and it's something that I hear very often from clients, they've got better at noticing when someone else is trying to have a difficult conversation with them. They've got better at picking up on the clues. Oh, this person's really trying to say something. They've said it badly. They need to read the book and learn how to do it properly, but they were trying to raise the topic. And there's a way that I can meet them halfway. I can hear that you are trying to talk a little bit about what you need when you get home. And I'm really grateful to you for raising that. If you spend a bit of time talking about or thinking about what you need, and could I have a little bit of time, I'm going to think about what I need, and then let's come together and find something that works for both of us. Wouldn't that sound? It sounds wonderful, doesn't it? Doesn't it sound like a great thing to do? That's the hope. We won't get it right every time. We will get it right some of the time. And the reward at the end of that uphill and rocky path is connection. They've done so many studies and talking to people at the end of life. And there are two things that come up. One is people saying that they wish that they said what they needed. They wish they'd spoken out. And the other one is the relationships in their lives. They wish that they'd paid more attention to their relationships. Dare to speak. The reason why these are difficult conversations that change everything is because at the heart, I always think in my life, what do I want to look back on and feel when I reach the end of my life? I love getting older. Youth against wisdom, I take wisdom every time. But I do think, and I think it's important, certainly for me, to think when I look back on my life, when I reach that end point, when I'm there trying to think up my famous last words, I'll want to know that I've paid attention to daring to speak and also to the quality of the relationships in my life. And really that's at the heart of this podcast. It's at the heart of my work. It's actually at the heart of everything I do. Because for me, it's what really matters. To communicate with you, to share what I know, and to hear what you have to say about it. So thank you so much for listening today. I hope it's been helpful for you. We've talked about rupture and repair. We've talked about how it matters and how complicated and messy it can feel. But I want you to know that I'm here with you throughout these podcasts to help you find a way through that messy space to connection, to being able to speak, to daring to speak, and to daring to listen. to improve the quality of your relationships. So please do reach out. If anything here resonated, comment, like, share. There's somebody out there who needs to hear this. That's what I feel. That's what I know. That's what I'm already finding, actually. Even in the first few downloads, I've had feedback to say that people are listening to this. And it's just so delightful to know that I can reach out. Please reach back. Tell me what you want to hear about. Tell me what you disagree with in what I've said. Because disagreement is golden. Disagreement is a beautiful thing because that's where we grow. So thank you for your time today. I look forward to hearing from you and seeing you on the next episode.